cost for folks to be able to.
Good evening. I'm calling the Wednesday, July 14th, 2021 Economic Development Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Economic Development Commission meeting will be held virtually. Is that my feedback? Be held virtually by using Zoom and in person while following social distancing guidelines. As chair, I'll be leading the Economic Development Commission meeting, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person or join via online Zoom. If attendees experience audio problems, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. This has usually fixed the issue. Additional instructions on how to participate are posted online at www.burnsvillemn.gov in the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is available for viewing on BCTV and on the city's website. You may participate in the meeting tonight online by going to https://zoom.us/join and typing in the meeting ID number 937-2642-6584. Once you are logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to. You may also call into the meeting at 651-372-8299 and enter meeting ID number 937-2642-6584. Now we got housekeeping out of the way. We'll move on to the agenda. The first item for tonight's meeting is the oath of office of our new Economic Development Commissioner. I think Beth will conduct the oath of office, so Beth, turn it over to you.
Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Audrey Janzen, do solemnly swear
I, Audrey Janzen, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Minnesota,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
and faithfully will discharge the duties as a member of the Burnsville Economic Development Commission
and faithfully will discharge the duties as a member of the Burnsville Economic Development Commission
of the city of Burnsville in the county of Dakota and the state of Minnesota
of the city of Burnsville and the county of Dakota and state of Minnesota
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Good job.
All right, we'll move on to the second item for tonight's meeting, the adoption of the agenda. Members of the commission, do you have any changes to the agenda? Staff, any changes?
None from staff.
All right, nothing. Looking for a motion.
A motion?
Second?
Motion by Fitchett, second by Lefevre. Sorry, I always keep forgetting that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All in favor say no. And the motion carries. We'll move on to agenda item number 3. Consider approval of the May 12th, 2021 Economic Development Commission meeting minutes. Members of the commission, do you have any changes to the meeting minutes? Not seeing any. Staff, any changes to the meeting minutes?
None from staff.
Okay. And with that, looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
I second.
Motion by Anderson, second by Fitchett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no, and the motion carries. So we're already on to agenda item number 4, Economic Development 101 training. So we got Jason Ardval is here from Ellers, who will present to us tonight on this item. So I guess before I send it over to Jason, does staff, Beth, have any other further introductions?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. The purpose of this agenda item is just to provide some training, economic development overview, for new and existing commissioners. It'll be a refresher for some and hopefully some helpful information. As Chair noted, Jason Arsvold from Ellers is here tonight. He's the city's financial advisor. So he has a presentation, and then we'll be able to answer any questions that anyone has.
Are we ready to go here?
We are ready.
Let's do it.
Are we seeing the presentation? Is that,
Yes.
okay. All right, so, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner. So what I have for you tonight is just a basic overview of economic development. And I know for some of you this may be review, but we've tried to come at it maybe from even a little bit different perspective and always try to mix new things in so it's interesting for everybody. So just a kind of overview of what we wanted to cover. Start with talking about what is economic development. So really starting from the very beginning, you know, when we talk about economic development, what does that mean? And I think that's a great place to start. And then I've titled the next section, Preparing for Success. So there are some things that you all can and have done to set yourself up to be successful in economic development. So we'll talk a little bit about what those things are. So plans and policies and the things that you might consider when you're providing financial assistance to any project that might be out there. We'll talk briefly about some of the tools that are available to you as a city to promote economic development. And then end with a project example specific to Burnsville. That is a recent one that we all have been working on together. And I want to apologize, I think the font for this presentation didn't quite come through correctly, and so I think Regina's done a good job of fixing the presentation, but if it looks a little goofy, that's why. So what is economic development? So we think about it as in terms of a comprehensive activity that cities undertake to help promote specific economic outcomes. And so I say comprehensive because it can mean a lot of things. It isn't just one thing. It isn't just doing a deal with tax increment financing. It's everything that you all do to promote economic development in your community. And that takes the form and shape of a lot of different things. So your plans and policies that you have in place are the foundation and the basis for that. And so those are all economic development activities. Doing that work is economic development. Creating funding sources and new programs that promote specific economic outcomes are economic development activities. So, that can take on a whole variety of different forms and shapes. But we often think about loans that are provided to businesses or individuals. Housing assistance is a part of that. The things that you're doing to promote neighborhood sustainability. All those things fall under the broad umbrella of economic development. Raising funds for these initiatives, so both in terms of direct allocation from the city itself, but also in terms of going out there and securing grants, which the city's been successful at doing, and any other funding that might be available that could support economic growth in the community. And then finally, I think what we often think about when we talk about economic development are those public-private partnerships with private development entities that the city enters into agreements with. Those are the big projects that tend to get a lot of the attention. The things that are most visible, but it's not the only thing. It does include all these other things that are happening on a daily basis, the things that your staff is doing every single day to promote economic growth in the community. So why do it? Why would we want to invest money? Why would we want to allocate city resources to do economic development? The list here are just a few of the reasons why. These are kind of the big ones, but a lot of times job creation is a big goal, right? Adding more jobs into the community. We know that helps in a lot of different ways. It helps, create opportunities for housing. It helps create opportunities for your retail sector because people are here working and spending money in the community. All kinds of reasons why you'd want to promote job creation. A really big one, and I think it's an important one for Burnsville, is tax-based growth and diversification, right? So it isn't just about purely growing that tax base, but it can also be about diversifying it. So if you're overly reliant on, like right now, you're a very much a bedroom community. Your tax base is primarily in single family housing. But you are doing things out there to promote industrial development and other business development and start diversifying that tax base in addition to growing it. And so that's an important one because those dollars that you invest should be invested to grow that tax base, which is in turn going to have an effect on being able to manage your tax rate in the community. So it's an investment. It isn't just spending money for no reason. You're doing it for a very specific reason and for very specific outcomes. Redevelopment, neighborhood preservation I talked about, infrastructure development that might need to occur with respect to a project, improving housing availability and choice is a big one that's out there, pollution control and cleanup, that's a fairly obvious one and often comes along with redevelopment. And then the last one, there are things that might enhance the quality of life. So you might be promoting a type of use that's gonna enhance the quality of life for residents in Burnsville. You might be adding trails, you might be adding even parks as part of your project. So that gets encompassed in there in terms of the why part about why you would do this. We talk about what are roles for economic development, so you all are part of a commission that exists in Burnsville. Different cities play different roles along a spectrum for economic development, so we think about this as, you know, you can play a role from limited to doing almost nothing to promote economic development in your community, or you could be on the other end of that spectrum and you could be a very aggressive community. And some of the pieces on this chart are the things that characterize where you fall on that spectrum, right? So it's very obvious the limited participation in economic development, you're not gonna be doing a whole heck of a lot. But all the way over to the most aggressive side of things where you're actually acquiring property, issuing bonds to promote redevelopment or development, that's very aggressive, and you can do anything in between. And I talk about this in terms of, you know, some communities, I should say, generally tend to fall somewhere along this spectrum. But just because you may fall along that spectrum as a community in general, doesn't mean necessarily that for the next project you need to fall along that spectrum, right? You may decide, no, that's not a project we wanna be aggressive with, or you might decide we're willing to be a little more aggressive than we typically are for this particular project. So it isn't, you aren't fixed in that position, but it's just kind of a way to think about, you know, how you might wanna engage in economic development. And thinking a little bit about roles, so policymaker roles, so, you know, I'll put the commission in that category, certainly the city council is in that category as a role of policymaker. Really, and again, this is what I'm about to talk about is really just one way we see the economic development activity work effectively. There's more than one way to do this, but when these roles are played in this manner, we see that tend to be the most effective way. So you all are sitting here, you're developing sort of those big picture goals and priorities. That's really your job, to really articulate what it is you wanna see happen within the community, try to set those priorities as a way to help direct staff to do the things that they're gonna do on their day-to-day work. So it's deciding about what you wanna see, making sure that the staff knows what they're supposed to pursue in terms of development. You're helping to develop those policies that are gonna serve as a guide. So every day, Regina and Beth are looking at these policies and saying, okay, are we operating within the boundaries here that have been set out for us, or aren't we? And that helps them guide their work. You're here to serve as an ambassador and a champion for the community, for projects, and just Burnsville in general. And then, you know, there's, while you're not directly approving the level of assistance for projects, historically, the process has been that those things come to you for your consideration. And so when a project is negotiated and brought forward, you're a part of that process to help ultimately recommend approving the broad level of assistance. But we also say here at the bottom that you're not necessarily sitting at the table with the developers negotiating. And then the staff, they're there to implement those goals, those policies on your behalf. They're doing the direct day-to-day work. They're the front line. They are the ones that are looking at projects, and they are doing that direct negotiation. They are coming up with the packages to help promote that particular project and the financial assistance that it might be requesting within the parameters that you all have set for them, right? So that making sure that whatever gets brought to you is within the boundaries of the policies and the goals that you all have laid out. And so they're doing all of that work. They're doing the customer facing work, the direct interaction with the community and with developers and others looking to invest in Burnsville. And then doing the job of keeping everybody connected, you know, you, the community, those that are investing in the community. And so that's just kind of a distinction there and how that works. And when those roles are played in that manner, it tends to be the most smooth and effective way to go about this. So a little bit about preparing for success. You know, you'll hear us talk a lot about the fact that we think it's important to have a plan. And before you start out on doing economic development, to first be thinking about what it is you want to accomplish. And we do that for a lot of reasons. One is to make sure that the staff and policymakers are on the same page. So when you ultimately do put these things in place, everybody understands we're all kind of rowing in the same direction to get things done. It's just setting up a foundation for success. When you do that, everybody's on the same page. It makes things a lot easier. When opportunity does come to you, you're ready to react to it. You can say, yes, this is something that does fit within exactly what we talked about. Makes that whole thing a lot easier as opposed to a community that maybe hasn't done that work and they really don't know what they want to assist. And then a project gets dumped in their lap and now they're trying to have both conversations at once. I've been in that position before, it's extremely difficult. And then the last one there is that, you know, you're really setting your priorities for a limited amount of resources. So there just aren't infinite resources to help accomplish everything you want to in Burnsville. And so it's important that you're only undertaking those things that are gonna get you where you wanna go. You could make the best deal in the world with a company or a business, and you know, they only got exactly what they needed, but if it's not a project that pushes you in the direction where you're trying to go, it was a waste of time. So, you know, that's why we say it's important from that perspective to use your resources wisely. And it's good, you know, it's easy for me to stand here and talk about this because, you all have done this work, right? And you know that, you've all been a part of it, you know, you're an example, I would say, for what people and communities should do with respect to economic development. And what that looks like in terms of your plan, so back in 2018, this commission was part of a process to establish an economic development and redevelopment strategic plan. That plan was adopted, this is just the cover of that plan, and then through that plan came several goals, and those are all listed here. I don't need to talk about all of them, but there was a very distinct set of goals that was intended for the staff then to go out and pursue. And that's, since 2018, a lot of that has been done. So if you look at this list, you know, there's a lot of things on here that the city's already started to work on. There's marketing and image improvement issues. There's, you know, Heart of the City has continued to develop, that's out there. You know, there was this fourth one, enhance and build awareness around the city's housing and commercial programs. There was a whole separate activity that was undertaken to adopt what's shown on the bottom of this slide there, 2021 Burnsville housing strategy. So that was at the very beginning of this year where that was adopted. And that was an offshoot of the planning exercise that was done. And so your staff has then taken all of that work to heart and gone out and focused their energies in a direction that was gonna help you achieve your strategic goals as a community. From that then flows your policy. So you've got your goals established, and that's great. We all understand what we're trying to accomplish. We know what we want to do. But what's important then is to have policies in place, as I've already talked about, to guide staff in a manner that, you know, is allowing them to go out and do their jobs, but providing them those parameters in which they need to work. So these policies that are out there right now, there's one that's required by statute, and that's called the business subsidy policy. If you're going to engage in providing subsidy to any business, there are provisions that need to be followed in this statute. And so the policies that you lay out talk about how you're gonna do that. You can include your own local goals, there are developer fee policies, there's applications that are out there. And you've done a good job of doing all of that work already and have that set of policies in place. And your policy is called the Burnsville Development Tools Policy. The tiny little graphic there is just for illustration. I don't intend for you to read that, but it's just the first page of an entire document that does all of the things that I just talked about. Again, you've met your requirements by state statute in that policy to outline how you're gonna consider business subsidies. You've included your own local goals, so you've talked about the kinds of projects that you would like to assist. You've given staff the direction on the priorities for development and redevelopment in that policy, so they understand when a project comes forward, they can evaluate whether that's gonna fit within that, and that's gonna help them weed out the projects that aren't, you know, going to fit in with those goals. And, you know, what we talked about in there is that it's hard, staff isn't gonna make, you know, arbitrary yes and no decisions. It's not always a bright line about whether or not it meets your policy and goals or not, but you know, if it's uncertain, then that's still gonna get brought forward as a borderline policy for the policy makers to decide whether they wanna continue to talk about that particular project. So, and then finally, what this is doing is helping, you know, the development community understand whether their project would warrant assistance. So it's you communicating out to everybody externally so that they all understand, look, if we wanna do something in Burnsville, these are the things that we need to do. These are the you know, qualifications that we need to meet. These are the objectives the city's trying to accomplish. So before they even come in and propose something and ask for assistance, they understand the bar and where that's at and what they need to do. And then shifting gears a little bit, why would you even want to consider providing financial assistance for a project? You know, it's a question that we deal with regularly, and it's one where kind of the rubber hits the road when it comes to economic development. It's ultimately, are you going to use city resources to help a project get built in your community? Why do we do that? Well, very simply, and it can be as we could talk for hours about this, but just very simply, you know, there are often financial barriers in particular areas or on sites that are preventing the private market from developing that particular site in the way that you'd want to see it or in accordance with your vision. It may be that something could get built on a particular site, but it may not be the thing that you would want to see. Or it may simply be that there are just barriers there, or nothing's ever going to happen unless there's some city involvement. And some of the typical things we see are listed there. You know, contamination is a big one. You know, some cities, high development fees can be a barrier. Market rents in a particular area might not be high enough to warrant new construction of a particular product type. Cost of adding infrastructure, you know, in an area that might not be developed yet, and if it has, you know, a high cost to extend utilities and roads, that could be a reason. You know, developers may have cheaper alternatives elsewhere. Or, you know, you might, as I said, have a vision for a particular site, but the market just doesn't agree that that's economically feasible. And that's okay, but that's an opportunity for you to engage with that private market and see if there's a way that you can help make your vision become reality. But when you're doing that, you know, we think it's important that you think about how you're gonna protect those scarce local resources. So this is the other role that, you know, you as a commission and the council all need to play, is that when you're going to consider providing financial assistance, there are some best practices, and you have these outlined in your policy about how you're gonna handle those requests. So part of the job is to make sure that when your applications come in, that those applications are being vetted and reviewed. We call that a pro forma analysis. You know, there are developers and businesses that will put forward an application. They'll give you their financial projections, and from that you can tell whether or not there is a need for assistance. You wanna be sure that your project qualifies for that assistance. We're always defaulting to what we call a pay-as-you-go type of assistance, where we're not giving money to projects up front. Rather, we're generally allowing those projects to get built, capturing that new revenue, and then directing it back to them, so that the city isn't coming out of pocket and isn't at risk for those upfront dollars. We wanna make sure that the private funding sources are maximized and that you're minimizing that public assistance and only giving enough so that a project can be financially feasible. So that's sort of the approach that we take when we're looking at this. All of that is really called, and some of you may have heard this term before, the but-for test. So really what that means is that the project would not occur but for the assistance that's coming from the city. And that's actually something that is a required finding whenever you're considering tax increment financing, which we'll talk about a little bit. The statute says that you need to make that finding. You need to find that, you know, if you're considering the project, that market value that's being created there is greater than other alternatives that might exist net of any assistance you're providing, and or that the likelihood of other development occurring in the foreseeable future without assistance is not going to occur. And as I said, that's just evidenced by that pro forma analysis that I talked about. So there's ways that you can make that finding, and we think that it's important, you know, not only to have that as a standard when you're considering tax increment financing, but really probably for any city assistance, even though it might not be required by statute. Again, when this is happening for tax increment, the council and or the planning commission need to make, well, the planning commission finds that it conforms to the plans of the city, but the council is required to make a finding that, you know, this would not occur but for the assistance when we're talking about a TIF project. So again, it's just something that is part of that process. Does that all make sense? Before we shift to development tools, any questions about anything I said about the, okay, I know this is all a lot of information. So, okay, so we've got plans and policies, we've got rationale for why we may participate. What do we have available for tools in order to be able to do that? There are many, and this is just a very, you know, high level look at the things that are available to you, but I've circled in red those that, you know, you have used commonly here in Burnsville, but you have the ability to levy a tax specific to economic development. It's an EDA levy, so that's something that you can do. Again, it's a tax, so you're raising taxes to collect money to promote economic development. And so Again, the idea there is, yes, it's a tax, but hopefully those investments are being directed in a manner that grows your tax base and is ultimately helping to manage the overall tax rate. Local revolving loan funds, these are, often thought of as business loans, but these can also be for housing, which is something that's been contemplated here in Burnsville as well. Tax increment financing, which is the one we talk about most commonly just because it's widely available and a powerful tool that cities have to promote development. Tax abatement, similar there, but some differences which we'll talk about. And then there are all kinds of state and local resources, but you have your Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. The county has resources that are out there. There are many others that are available to you as well, and it just depends on the kind of project. But your staff is aware of these resources and is usually looking for those for every project that comes forward. So we're gonna shift gears a little bit and talk about tax increment financing, which, this is a topic that I always say we have a seminar that we do every year when there isn't a pandemic in February, and we spend 2 hours dedicated just to the basics of tax increment. I'm gonna literally spend 5 minutes on this. So there's a lot to know about this, but I think just if we can go away with a basic working understanding of just what it is, then I think that's probably good enough for tonight. But basically, in terms of like the verbal definition, is that it's this ability to capture and use most of the increased local property tax revenues from new development within a defined geographic area for a defined period of time without the approval of other taxing jurisdictions. So what are we saying there? We're saying that when a project gets built, if it's in a district, you have the ability to, the increase in taxes there, you have the ability to capture some of those and use those in a way that can help that project. And so what does that look like visually? And again, the font got messed up here, so I apologize for that. But what this is a chart that shows in the blue there is an existing piece of land. Let's think about it that way, that has a value attached to it. And then a project starts being constructed, and that's the red part of this chart. And the value of that project starts to increase until it's completed. And then that area in red is the value or the increment that we can then capture for a number of years. And in this case, I'm using a 26-year district example, and we'll talk about a little bit about the differences in the terms of districts. We can capture that for the period of time that project is in the district. Okay, so all of that area in red there is what's gonna be available to us to help the project. And then the area in blue is going to continue to get paid to all those same taxing jurisdictions. So the idea here is that everybody's sort of held harmless by the creation of this district. And if you've met that but-for standard, you can stand there in front of the community and explain to them, look, none of this tax would have ever been there had we not done the TIF in the first place. So that's one thing to kind of think about when talking about this in the community. And then the idea is that at the end, the whole reason why you did this is that you took a piece of property in the blue there and turned it into a tax base that's in the orange color there, so that's now out of the district, and all that new value isn't being captured anymore, and it's available to the city to be able to use how it sees fit, right? It's new tax base that you can use for raising revenues, for tax relief, however you choose to do it. You just have more value to use now as a community, and that's really the whole goal here. So we're trying to keep these projects in districts for the shortest duration possible, get them out, and then get you your new tax base as a community. And for a city like Burnsville, where redevelopment is gonna be your primary mechanism for growth and tax base, this becomes an important tool for you. You can't just create a district anywhere you want. You have to, under the statute, have a reason to be able to do that. And so there are different types of districts. And this is the extent of the detail that I'm gonna go into about this, and they're organized by what you want to accomplish, right? So if you're looking to do redevelopment, you can do what's called a redevelopment TIF district or a renewal and renovation TIF district. And there are some standards that you need to meet to be able to create those districts. A redevelopment district's a little more difficult test to meet, and recognizes that there's probably a little more of an acute redevelopment issue there, so it allows you to go 26 years. So you can collect increments for up to 26 years. Renewal and renovation is basically the same thing, except that the standard of creation of those districts is a little easier. And the idea is that your redevelopment problem might not be as bad. And so then you should only maybe need 16 years. I think that's the logic in the statute there. So you've got a 16-year maximum if you go that route. Once you create those, you can build whatever you want in those districts and collect the increment and use those to benefit the project. And really what you need to do is put the resources back to offset costs that allowed the district to be created in the first place, right? So you're supposed to use the increment to fix the redevelopment problem. That's what the statute says you have to do. If you wanna create affordable housing, you can create a housing TIF district, and that allows up to 26 years, just recognizing that providing housing affordability is expensive and challenging. You can create those districts if your housing meets certain income, tests and thresholds. So as long as your project does that, you're able to create a housing district and then create, or capture those increments for 26 years. And then the last one there, if you're looking to do simply job and tax-based creation on what might be a greenfield site, doesn't need to have any kind of redevelopment on it, you can do what's called an economic development TIF district. And because it's greenfield and there aren't big redevelopment challenges, the limitation there is 9 years. So that's the longest that you can create a district like that. There are other districts, there are soils districts that you can establish to fix contamination. Those allow up to 20 years. They're not as common, but they do exist, and they are another one that's out there. That's all I'm gonna say about TIF. Does anybody have any questions about TIF? I know it's a lot, but does the basic concept at least make sense? You know, you're capturing a little bit of new revenue to help the project.
Jason, maybe not you, but what kind of TIF did we get for the Burnsville Center area?
So, Chair and members of the commission, we have requested and been approved for redevelopment TIF for that area. So that was approved at the state legislature this season. So yeah, some good news, great news.
Exciting.
Yes.
And that's where my simple explanation, we diverge a little bit, right? Because that actually required special legislation. You couldn't just create, there were some provisions in statute that you wanted to get exceptions to so that you could do a redevelopment like that, and it required actually the legislature to approve it. When you create any of these kind of districts, if they qualify, you can go ahead and do it. You don't need legislature approval. But in that case, there were things that just weren't gonna work to do a large-scale redevelopment like that, and that's very typical. Then you need to ask for special legislation.
And if I may add, the reason why we did request special legislation was because the building, after analysis, was not considered blighted, and that was one of the tests that you need to make or meet in order to request the redevelopment TIF. So that was one of the exemptions that we requested through special legislation.
And then just a little bit about tax abatement. So conceptually, it's kind of the same thing, right? Tax abatement. You know, the difference here though is that, you know, you're still, you know, capturing value, you're still redirecting it to the project. In this case though, you can't just create one of these abatements for every taxing jurisdiction. So when you create a TIF district, it'll capture the city portion, the county portion, and the school portion, and then the small taxing jurisdictions portion of the tax. With abatement, and you can do that without approval of those jurisdictions, as I said. With abatement, you can do the same thing, but every jurisdiction would need to opt in. They would need to agree to participate. And, you know, that doesn't happen all that often, and so this isn't quite as widely used, but it is something that is sometimes accessed, and some cities will do it with cooperation from a school district or a county, and sometimes not. Sometimes it'll just be the city's portion, but it's only really done when you can't create a tax increment district, right? So if you've got some folks that wanted to build market rate housing, and that doesn't qualify for a tax increment district unless it's redevelopment. So they might consider using abatement. If you wanna build office and retail space, there aren't really options to do that with tax increment, again, unless it's in a redevelopment district. So some cities have opted to use tax abatement for those reasons. So really, it's become one of those tools where if you can't use tax increment, it's something that you can look to do as a community and use tax abatement.
And can I ask a question here? I just want to make sure I'm clear on tax abatement. That is where an entity, we're not going to charge them taxes, right, for a certain period of time, or can you clarify just for my understanding on that?
Sort of the mechanics of how it works.
Yes.
So for all of these, including tax increment, it will not affect what the particular business or entity pays on their property tax bill. So they're all gonna pay the same amount. The difference is that with tax increment, it gets captured by the county and then sent to the city, which the city can then direct back through an agreement to that business. Abatement is kind of the same way, except the county's not involved. The city actually levies an amount of that tax and then collects that separately. It's paid normally by the business, the city collects it separately, holds it, and then can redirect it through an agreement back to the business. So it's more of a refund than it is a forgiveness of taxes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And with all of these, this is just kind of the very simple high level of this. So great, we've captured 26 years of revenues, so what, right? How does that help a project? And so in order to help a project, we need a financing mechanism to do that. And I talked about the primary way that we're looking at doing that. In this case, pay-as-you-go TIF note. It could be an abatement note. It would work the same way with abatement. What we're saying is that we're not gonna give you, developer, any funds up front. What we're gonna do is that we're gonna say that we're going to enter into an agreement with you. If you build what you said and the increment gets generated, we're gonna collect that. And then we're gonna give that back to you over time until we pay off this note that we've issued. And so it does a couple things. One, it means that the city doesn't have to come up with any money up front and be at risk, right? If the development doesn't go forward, or let's say it goes forward but isn't valued as highly as anticipated and the revenue is short, it's not gonna short you from your investment. It makes sure that, again, only the funds that are coming out of the new value are gonna get redirected, so the rest of the taxpayers are never on the hook for this. And then it also ensures that if we do get to the end of the period of time that we've agreed to, and say we agreed to pay $100,000, but we can only pay $90,000, but the district's done, and there isn't gonna be any more increment, it's all developer risk. The city doesn't have to make up that differential. So this default mechanism is pay-as-you-go. The developer goes out, they get more money. They either raise it from their bank or they bring more equity, and then they get this payment over time to help extinguish that new debt. So that's how that works. It's as simple as that. And it's really the default way, as I said, where, I think virtually every deal that Burnsville has been done that way. You can issue general obligation or revenue bonds, but then clearly, there's a risk associated with that. If you issue debt for a project that, is to be built, you're relying, one, on the fact that it gets built, and then two, that the revenues come in just like you had projected they were going to come in. If you issue a general obligation bond and none of that happens, you're pledging to cover that with the, full faith and credit of the city, so you're paying that differential. So you can understand why that's a riskier position to be in. There's really not a lot of need to do this for development projects. Some cities have done it for, larger scale redevelopment projects where they may want to acquire some land and they don't have a war chest of resources to do that. They may be willing to take that risk because it's an important enough project. But for a typical development project with the developer involved and a site and a kind of a normal project, it just really hasn't been necessary. There are revenue bonds that are payable only from the revenue of a tax increment district, but those are not very common and anymore, harder to sell unless you got a district that's up and operating and proven revenue stream, but at that point, there's really not a lot of reason to do that. So those are the options, and that's how you get that 26 years of payments into a project today, and that's how we help finance these projects. So we can stop and talk a little bit about an example. Any more about TIF or abatement that you wanna ask before I jump into this?
So can the developer take the TIF agreement with the city to the bank and actually use that kind of as a collateral or for a loan?
They can, yeah, and that's what they do. They can actually take it to their lender and say, look, I've got this commitment. A lot of lenders will say, okay, well, we'll increase your mortgage by this much to, help you, and you'll use that revenue to underwrite your loan. They can actually take that note and physically sell it to a lending institution and realize proceeds that way. A lot of times if they do that, they're taking a little bit of a cut on that. They might only get, like 75% on the dollar or something, but there are ways to take that note and actually turn it into financing. That's the idea. Yep, and that's what they do. So the example that I just wanted to touch on briefly, and it's a recent one, we have Capstone Quadrangle. They're building an industrial building on what is known as the Astleford site. So that's how some other folks know it. I know this is right here in Burnsville. The map is there. It's a 16.6 acre site. The developer is proposing over 230,000 square feet of industrial development. And when we get to this whole thing about why are we looking at providing financial assistance, and I know some of you are familiar with this project, why would we do it? Well, in this case, that site has, what has been quantified as up to $3.5 million in extraordinary site costs. So these are expenses that are, you know, remediation of contaminated soils, there are structural soils issues, all of these things that need to be fixed in order for these buildings to actually get built on this site. And so there was some rationale there to consider looking at providing some city assistance. So the developer came in, we had an initial meeting, and here it was one of my first, I think, meetings that was in person as we started sort of coming out of the pandemic, and talked about their challenge, talked about what could be done, talked about what the city could do to help. Their project is, you know, $27 million project. That per unit number is not accurate. That's a holdover from something else. But so what we did, we used your process, right? We looked at it through the lens of what the strategic plan was calling for. We looked at it through the lens of what the policy said. And we looked at the ways in which it fit within that context and decided that, you know, it was something that warranted at least consideration. And so it moved sort of that next step, which really was looking at, okay, well, can we even, cover that gap, right? And so we started looking at the developer's pro forma, as I said, did that pro forma analysis. We're looking at all the things that they say that are causing them problems in terms of trying to make this work, right? We want to understand, are those things true, right? That's basically what we're doing. And so we're looking at what they're paying for the land, we're looking at the construction costs, are there projected rents in the realm where they should be for the marketplace? Because if they're not, and they're showing them lower, they're gonna show a greater need for assistance. Are they financing this the way we would expect to see? Are they charging an appropriate amount for a developer fee? Is there a return on investment that they're projecting within what we would consider to be an industry standard? And if it's not, we're gonna have a conversation about that, and we're gonna say, well, is your gap really this big? And so we did all that work, looked at their numbers, and, substantiated the fact that they've got on the bottom there in the circle on the right, 3.5 million in actual redevelopment costs, remediation costs, we'll call them there, that are above and beyond what a normal industrial project would need to support. But we also looked at what this could generate in tax increment financing. It's in an existing tax increment district, again, created by special legislation, so we're outside the box here a little bit, but and it's already collecting increment, and the clock is already ticking on the number of years that are left. So, we said, look, even if you build this, we can only generate about 1.76 million in tax increment, so we can't solve your whole gap for you. Which meant that then they needed to go out and look for grants. And so there are other grants anticipated, some are applied for, some are awarded. I'm not sure the status of all of them. I know Regina probably knows the answer to that, but the idea was we're relying on those grants. And we're relying on potentially, if those don't come through, a conversation with the landowner about the land price, right? All those things needed to come together to make this work. And if all of this got built without tax increment, the developer was looking at a yield on cost of 5.3%. So that's just a metric that developers use to understand whether this project is worth it for them. Are they gonna be able to attract enough money to be able to build this project? And, we see in the marketplace for industrial development, people wanting to see about 6.5% to 7% yield on cost. And what that number is, it's very simple. It's the project's net operating income divided by what it costs to build it. That's what that number represents. And we weren't getting there. We weren't getting there without tax increment. And so with the TIF, it started to push that up to about 6.3%, started to get a little closer. It got to a point where the developer was at least comfortable with the tax increment commitment to be able to move forward with the project. And so all of those things came together. There were discussions about that. There was a term sheet that was considered, ultimately an agreement that was approved. And so my understanding of the project right now is it's actually gonna be going to the Planning Commission on the end of the month. For that work, right, the land use entitlement piece of it. Council consideration on August 2nd. As I said, the TIF part of this is approved, and then the grant applications, I think at least one of them is approved, and maybe
Yes.
some are pending.
So I can go over what's been approved so far, if the commission's interested.
Yeah, of course.
We've received approval of 2 deed grants, one a contamination cleanup grant of approximately $612,000, a deed redevelopment grant of $450,000, a Metropolitan Council TBRA account, which was just approved this afternoon, for $421,600, and then the TIF is 1.76 estimate, which brings the total to $3,243,595. So that's where we are right now. We have applied for a Dakota County RIG grant of $250,000. That's pending. And then we did receive council direction to keep this on a list as a potential Dakota County Environmental Legacy Fund grant option. So we have $1.15 million that we have to spend by the middle of September. So this is on our short list.
So all good news, that's news to me too, I didn't realize that, with all that was, so that's, I mean, to me, that's sort of like a home run for the project, right? Because you've got all those, we anticipate that we could get all those sources, but you never know if you're going to. So it's a testament to the hard work that I know that everybody's done to get those applications in. And, you know, again, if everything comes together, you know, a great project that fits within the goals that you set out. So it's kind of being able to follow things through from how the goals were set up to a project actually coming out of the ground and being consistent with what you set out to do in the first place. And that's kind of what I mean when I say, you know, it's important, all those steps are important. You got an outcome that you intended, right, with all that hard work and effort. So I think, you know, the staff should be commended about all that work that they've done, and the commission and council for all the work they did setting those policies and goals in place. So that's all I had for my formal comments, but certainly happy to go into any more detail or answer any questions.
I'll open it up to questions from the commission, comments.
When does a TIF district start? The time, you know, the 26 years?
Yeah, there's a couple of, I'm kind of laughing because it's almost like an existential question here. It's the duration is measured from the receipt of when you get your first tax increment. So when we talk about 26 years, it's 26 years of receipt of increment. So we'll certify a district when it's approved, and that often happens sometimes 1.5 years to 2 years before the first increment is received. So the TIF statute is a maze, and some of the provisions in there are tied to certification date. Some are tied to when you get your first tax increment, and the duration is tied really to receipt of first increment. So in the example that I used in the district at the Astleford site, that district has already received tax increment, so therefore the clock has already started ticking. And this is gonna get built, if they start this year, it'll get valued for the first time for pay 2023, so there won't be increment from this project until 2023. So we've already missed out, you can see how that works, you've already missed out on 2 or 3 years of increment, I can't remember exactly which, but, so that's just kinda how it works.
Anything else? Seeing nothing, thank you, Jason, very helpful. This was just for informational purposes, no recommendation or motion is required on this agenda item. So with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, the Economic Development Strategic Plan Update. And Beth Weber will present on this item and provide an overview and on the background report.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
Some good news for us tonight that we've already covered, but we'll go into a little bit more detail and just some highlights on the agenda tonight. So our strategic plan goals, we touched on them a little bit, but to expand further, ensuring sustainability of the Burnsville Shopping Center County Road 42 corridor. Cohan Realty, which is the new mall owner, they are currently in for development application. It's being reviewed by staff. It's their goal to subdivide their properties, to be able to sell some of those parcels off to pay down the debt that they owe for the mall property. Additionally, we do have a permit in for an Old Navy tenant build out in the former Retro Fitness space within, the Burnsville Marketplace. And then you may or may not have heard, Dakota County is doing a visioning study on County Road 42, spanning from Burnsville all the way into Rosemount. So there was a clickable link in the background, and information is available on the county's website. They're doing a lot of outreach and informational events that you can participate in if you do want more information on that. The second goal is to improve the image of School District 191 and the city. So you've received previous updates that we've been working on the hidden gems boxes. They are here. We have a plan for distribution. And you can each grab one following the meeting tonight as an example to kind of check it out, but there is a photo on the graphic there. The city also has a new Instagram profile, so we are very excited about that. Our department has been championing that for quite some time, so we're excited that that's another way for us to reach the community and to interact and get information out to a broader audience. And then additionally, we have Grow Burnsville is still progressing nicely. You've probably noticed, even driving in tonight, regardless of which way you came in. Closer to Nicollet, there's the food forest. So there's fruit trees, nut trees, and other items that are planted currently, and we're looking forward to seeing the progress on that. And then further down Civic Center Parkway, is the market garden, and so that is going to provide education and internship opportunities, and that took the place where the ice rink previously was. And then we also have a new inclusive park here in Burnsville. It's at Red Oak Park, and you can see the graphic. They have different height basketball hoops. They have a in-the-ground merry-go-round that you could wheel onto with a wheelchair, and then different musical elements for people of all ages to enjoy. We are continuing development within Heart of the City. Our last meeting, I was able to share that MWF was in for a development application. They have been approved by City Council, so they had proposed 135 unit senior affordable and 162 unit market rate apartment buildings within Heart of the City. So we're thankful that that was approved and moving forward. And then Orange Line construction is continuing, and they seem to be making great progress in Heart of the City as well.
Question for you?
Yeah.
The MWF Properties project, is that, what is the next steps on that? Because I understand there might be a TIF question or inquiry, which I know typically the city doesn't receive real well for housing. Where's that at?
So, if I may answer, for the Kraus-Anderson-owned property, they are not requesting any specific city assistance, such as TIF. They may be applying for other funding through the state or the county. And that's all we have as far as public information as far as the MWF property at this time.
Okay. So very high probability at this point that it'll go through?
The actual development land use has been approved. As far as financing and it moving forward from a developer feasibility standpoint, that'll be yet to come.
I see, yeah. Thanks.
So we are continuing to enhance and build awareness around the city's existing housing and commercial programs and developing new programs as appropriate. The city did a targeted mailing based on eligible census tracts to approximately 300 businesses to highlight the Small Business Administration's EIDL financing tool. So we know that there are a lot of businesses that are still struggling within Burnsville. And based on that census data, we wanted to push that out, and my contact information was listed, and multiple people have reached out with questions, and seemed to be a positive outcome from that mailing. So that's something that we'll definitely continue monitoring and pushing out information as we have it. Additionally, we still have our partnership with Open to Business. So for our new commission members, and just reminders, that is a free partnership that we have, or it's a free service that is provided to Burnsville residents or people with businesses within Burnsville. They can have business consulting, marketing information, information about different financing that they might need. They can help you build a business plan. So it's a really great tool that we want to highlight. And they are having small business coffee networking event on August 18th, and that is located at the library in Egan. So information can be found on the Dakota County Library's website. And then we do continue our Grow Minnesota visits with the chamber, so that has been a good partnership, and we've completed, I believe, 3 within the last week and a half. So it's been a busy time, but it's a really great partnership that we have. We are continuing the city's position as a regional destination. So the city had a booth at the Back to the 80s event, and we were able to give out information on the police department, different development information. We gave out community guides, the chamber guide, and it was a really great way to connect with the community at that event. We will also have booths at Party on the Plaza. The next one is July 22nd. So you can come check us out there, where we will be highlighting the Tour de Flavor restaurant promotion that we have going on. So that's going to run July 15th through the 31st. And it's in partnership with Experience Burnsville to highlight all of the diverse restaurant options that we have here in Burnsville. Participants will get a map, and you just have the restaurant sign the back of it, and you can submit that to the city at the end of the promotion to try to win a prize. So we are excited about that again this year.
Have you had more restaurants sign up this year than last year?
We have, yep, we have 21 restaurants that signed up to participate. So.
And where do we go to get that information? Starts tomorrow.
It does start tomorrow. So I have some flyers here tonight that I can pass out to you. And then we do have information on our website. And then each of the participating restaurants will have posters in their windows, and then a small supply of the maps as well. So, but everything is available on the website.
Be sure to hashtag you belong in Beeville and hashtag Tour de Flavor on your social media handles to get the word out. Share the great restaurants and businesses that we have in the city.
Okay, any comments, commission, from the commission?
I just have one comment. You know, we put, these 5 goals have been identified, and I think they're all really good goals. But I would recommend that we put some measurable components around each of those goals, so that from year to year, we can kind of look at them and say, okay, what kind of progress are we making? So that we really know we're making progress, and if people ask about it, we can say, yeah, look, the tax base in the heart of the city was here when we started, and now it's here. That would be, for example, one clear goal that we could have in the heart of the city and measurement of that. And so I'd recommend that we put a little bit more thought, maybe 3 or 4 goals around each of those, or 3 or 4 measurement tools around each of those goals, so that we can clearly distinguish and differentiate, you know, the impact that we're making on those goals, or the progress that we're making. Food for thought.
And I think that would help celebrate when those things happen too, because a lot of stuff has happened.
That's a really great idea. And within the economic development strategic plan, we do have kind of bullet point lists under each strategic plan item, things that we, as a staff, as policymakers, as a city, plan to work towards. I do like the idea of kind of taking it one step further and capturing, you know, like you said, that dollar amount or like physical numbers. And I think that's, you know, perhaps something that we can add as an agenda item at a future meeting. You know, we as staff can present some ideas further, and then you can react to that and brainstorm.
Yeah, I think that'd be perfect. You know, as difficult as it is in coming up with those 5 goals and as much time that was spent on it, What's even more difficult is actually executing on those 5 goals and making sure that we're making progress. And we've been making a lot of good progress, but it would be really good to find that because there's also some areas that I think we could probably improve upon. And if we dusted it off every 6 months and we said, hey, how are we doing in these areas? Where are we not doing as well as we'd like to do? Let's put some more energy in this particular area. For instance, we have the residential component on the redevelopment for energy that we rolled out last time. What are we doing on the commercial side or the school district? How much progress are we making on the school districts? Or what can we do differently to help more? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And we do a lot of that tracking when we either departments present on the budget or that we've done with check-ins with the city council. But I think to have something a little more spelled out and kind of a check-in when we check in with you when we meet at your EDC meetings, to have that displayed a little more, it's a great idea. Oh, looks like the mayor has
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, in your background, you have the strategic plan that we all worked on. So there are goals identified, but I think Commissioner LaFever, you have made some very good observations. But if you look at the strategic plan, there are strategies and actions and tactics, but there's also goals. There's also performance metrics in there. So I would suggest that if you look at that and study it, and then let our staff know which you would like to see us monitor more. Because the metrics are in place, the strategies and the action tactics are already, and this is something that we all worked on. If you all remember, in 2019, we sat and worked on all of this. So if we're missing something, because some of these have goals, and but if you want to see something more that we can continue to measure, I think that would be useful. But so identify that, and then make a recommendation. But look at what we worked on. Yeah, because we spent a lot of work, because there's strategies, there's actions and tactics, and there are goals, long-term and short-term goals that we all agreed upon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we spent long nights putting the plan together.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions or anything? Otherwise, this was just informational as well. No motion or recommendations is required on this agenda item. So if there's nothing else, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, election of chair and vice chair. I see Beth still standing up there. Do you want to give a background report, or Regina?
Sure,
Do you want to go into, or?
I'll give a brief overview. We were notified, unfortunately, Commissioner Newman is leaving the city of Burnsville. He'll no longer be a resident or have a business within the city of Burnsville, so he will be stepping down. Tonight's his last meeting. We do thank you for your service, all your volunteer time. You did a great job running the meetings as chair and previously as vice chair, I believe.
Yes.
And we really thank you for your time. So with that, we will need a new vice chair and we'll need a new chair. We currently have Vice Chair Fitchett. Traditionally, the past 2 years, I believe, we've done the election of chair and vice chair in September, but given that Chair Newman's leaving, we're going to do the election of chair and vice chair now. And so there has been some indication of interest as from Vice Chair Fitchett to serve as chair, and interest from Commissioner Anderson to serve as vice chair. Certainly, it's up to you as a commission for those roles and who you feel as a group who should fill those roles. So I'll leave that discussion up to you and each vote.
Thank you, Regina. I'll open it up for election of chair, so open up to the commission for any recommendations or communication or comments. Any?
I'd like to make a motion to approve both chair and vice chair, or maybe right now just chair.
I mean, if there's no objections, can we do both at the same time?
That's fine, yep.
I don't see any objections. I think it's a great fit for both of them. So with that, we got a motion to Chair Fichette, Vice Chair Anderson.
Second?
We got a second. Bye. How the forget your last name?
Thank you,
Janzen.
Commissioner LaFave.
So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. It carries. Well, that was an easy discussion.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll carry it well.
You will certainly carry it well. We'll be in good hands. And with that, we move on to agenda item number 7, updates. Only update I have here is the next EDC meeting is scheduled for September 8th, 2021. As Regina said, I'm leaving the commission. I just wanted to thank city staff, Madam Mayor, City Council for all the help that they've supported me with here of having me on the commission. It's been wonderful serving the commission as a resident of Burnsville. Sad to leave Burnsville. It's been my home for 11, 12 years. Family just decided to move out for more land in a suburb southwest of here. So, you know, I've had great interactions with you guys. Gonna miss you guys. I still will plan to come to all the events, Firebuster International Festival. We won't be far away. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Chair Newman. I just want to say thank you for your service to the city. And I hope that you will come so that we can recognize your service at a council meeting.
I certainly.
And thank you so much for all that you do. And to all of the commissioners, thank you for your work. Because without the work that you do in advising us, we can't accomplish what we've accomplished. And all of you probably have seen the transformation in Burnsville from the heart of the city, what it used to look like, to the 2 TIF areas. So you looked at TIF 1 and 2, that whole area from County Road 5 to the border of Savage, where all those businesses are. There were no businesses when I came into office, and now you can see that it is an area that is filled with businesses that have brought a lot of jobs. So that's the kind of work that we do together. And I thank you for all of that. Thank you for your work and your service. And we're going to miss you, Chair Newman. So I'm glad to hear that you'll continue to come and celebrate the different activities and events that we have in Burnsville. Don't be a stranger.
I will not. Thank you, Madam Mayor. With that, any other updates from city staff?
We do have a few, yes. Just as a reminder, the hidden gems boxes are here. Make sure you grab one before you go. You may have heard that we are doing a city code and zoning code update that has begun. And drafts of revised sections of code will be circulated to you as commissioners for comments from an economic standpoint, from a business standpoint. We do want your feedback and we will value that input greatly. Reminder to check out our development map often. We have lots of cranes in the air, lots of things going on, so if you're not sure what's going on, reach out to staff or check out the map. It is updated regularly. Update on our South Cross Portland city-owned land. We had submitted a request for a grant to have a Phase 1 environmental study done. That is completed and it's currently being reviewed by the CDA and then will be routed to city staff in the future, near future. And as Regina mentioned, Capstone 35 Asselford project, we were awarded the $611,995 deed contamination grant, and the $421,600 Met Council TBRA grant was also approved. And then, as she mentioned, the Dakota County rig is still under review. So those are the updates that I have right now.
All right, thank you, Beth. And with that, there are no further items to come before us tonight, so looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a motion? Motion by Anderson, second by Fichette. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a good night, everyone.